Have you ever had a DM that made a ruling that instantly made you walk away from the table? If so, do us a favor and let us know in the comments below. I made a ruling that made one of my players drop immediately. Now, we play online, so walking away from the table basically means dropping from the game. It was a tough fight, and the player's ambush didn't work out as well as they'd hoped. Anyway, one round, the party bard decides to cast one of his high-level spells at the enemy adjacent to him. Now, that enemy happened to have the Mage Slayer feat, so I ruled that he got to take an attack on the bard as a reaction. 20! Ah, crap. Critical. In hindsight, I should have lied and said it was a miss. I knew the player was already getting frustrated, but I didn't think clearly or quickly enough. I rolled damage, and the bard goes down. We use fantasy grounds, so a lot of this is automated, or I would have reduced the damage to keep the bard above 1 HP. Anyway, the already frustrated player immediately logs off without a word. Granted, he's a bit like that sometimes, and had been going through a lot of stressful and difficult things in real life. So I immediately regretted it and wished I'd thought to say that the attack was a miss. It was even worse in hindsight when I realized I misruled on Mage Slayer. The attack happens after the triggering spell, so the bard's spell would have gone off and dropped the foe before the foe was able to react and counterattack. It was 4 to 5 months before the player came back to the game. I once was playing in a very long-running campaign. I think it was Planescape 2nd Edition. Good choice. Our party was extremely well established and quite high-leveled. We had recently taken out a Baylor who had been bothering us permanently. Long story, but basically a holy water surprise on the surface of the abyss. So it died in its home plane, thus it was permanent. Just to give you an idea of how advanced the group was. We had played together almost every weekend for something like 2 years at this point. But a friend and I had to miss one particular session, and when we asked what happened, we were told that our side business, a low to high level magical weapons custom order shop, had gotten tampered with, causing some kind of massive fine like 1,000,000 gold pieces. Ugh. To pay it off, the other characters decided that our 2 characters should get sold off into slavery, and the DM apparently agreed instantly. Now, if there was a role-playing reason for this, that would have been one thing, but this was just teenagers being annoying. It wasn't a, hey, let's try to escape sort of thing. It was a, hey, time for you 2 to make new characters sort of thing. Now here's the stupidest part of this situation. Both of us had more than 1,000,000 gold pieces in liquid assets. We could have paid the fine with cash, and so could any of the other 5 characters. So anyway, the 2 of us quit the game, and I believe the group itself lasted maybe another month before falling apart. We had created an in-person group and met up every once in a while. One day I was out smoking, taking a bit longer than I usually do, so they started without me, probably 10 minutes or so. When I finally sit down, I asked, hey, what did I miss? The DM pings me for 1 damage. Okay, frustrated, I ask, what was that for? Take another point of damage. Before I knew why he was doing this, I was frustrated and basically said, that's not cool, in an angry tone. His reply was, I should know what's happening. One argument later and he stops the session and we never meet up for D&D again. My friend later on had told me that he was upset that people were cutting him off and decided to ping people for damage. I am honestly not sure who was in the right and wrong, but I believe neither of us were in the right at the end. If you take anything away from what I've said, please just take a second as a DM to explain what's happening to your players if they ask, instead of punishing them without an answer. Yeah, the table kind of fell apart for other reasons shortly after, but I never attended the last few sessions. I was part of a 5th edition game that had been running for the best part of a year. My character was a Protector ASMR Glamour Bard who mainly focused on psychic damage. I like that. We had gotten to a part of the campaign that was closely tied to their backstory, so naturally I was really excited. We got into a fight with some constructs, and I quickly realized that they were all immune to psychic damage. Well, that isn't an issue, and I don't blame the DM. I just realized that I need to get a bit more inventive. So I tried flying above people to avoid attacks and help support from above. Nope, the ceiling is 10 feet up, so I can still be attacked from below. Okay, cool. Again, not blaming the DM. I spend the majority of the combat doing not much other than making a single melee attack per turn. That would technically miss because I wasn't built for melee, and giving out bardic inspiration. I did come up with one cool plan though. There was a construct tunneling beneath us and nobody could hit it with anything other than opportunity attacks. So, I used Mantle of Majesty and commanded it to approach, which means it ends its turn as soon as it gets within 5 feet of me, meaning it can't tunnel away. I paired that with me flying 5 feet above the ground so it would have to surface, and the party would have a turn to wail on it. It came to its turn, and sure enough, it approached and surfaced, getting within 5 feet of me. Then the DM says it's going to attack. Well, I point out that it can't because it has to end its turn, and they say that command is up to DM interpretation. I tell them that in this case, I am using one of the examples written in the spell, so no, it isn't, and the whole thing devolves into an argument. It ends with them basically saying, the DM's word is final, and making the attack anyway. It did like 4 points of damage and the combat ended next turn, and the whole situation left a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't like the way the DM handled any of that. It felt like they wanted a way to get one more attack off because they were disappointed in how the combat was going. I left the table after the next session, and the whole thing dissolved a few sessions later. Oh yeah, the DM allowed the other players to attack a creature that I controlled, but when I retaliated and went to kill their familiar, he suddenly looks at the other player and asks if he wants to allow PvP. I have never played with anyone from that game since, and some of them I've played with for years prior. It sounds like they really didn't like you very much, or your little companion that you had, and I'm sorry for it. Years ago, I was a DM of an online game over Skype, and software that we had set up to implement 4th edition rules. My idea was to set up an encounter that was too hard for the group, capture them, and then they would ultimately escape and defeat the villain later as they leveled up. As character after character fell, the paladin was the only one left, and when he died, he immediately hung up the call in tears without enough time to explain what happened next. It was a terrible move on my part, and I didn't think about how it would affect them. No, but a bad decision pushed me close to the edge. Back in my first real job, I met a new colleague who sat in the next cube. We got along well from the start, and when we discovered we were both gamers, that was pretty exciting. He attended college locally, and so his college gaming group was in the area. I started to game with them, which was fun. As an existing gaming group, there are a few personalities about whom I should probably say a few words. Glenn, my colleague who introduced me to the group. Quite often a GM, not a player. When he was a player, he tended to exercise outsized influence due to often playing the GM, but also pretty charismatic. Glenn was the single best GM that I've ever played with. Creative, excellent ability to anticipate and strategize. Colin, nice guy, reasonably bright, always got along well with him. Colin was going to run a campaign for D&D. This was back in the 2nd edition days. It wasn't a rule set I liked very much, but I figured, hey, what the heck. Session 1. We all show up, go through the obligatory PC introductions, and finally get this story underway. I'm already a little leery because the wizard PC was allowed to start play with a pseudo-dragon familiar, but that player is pretty persuasive. He's a lawyer. So okay, whatever. We stumble into the plot, and as we set out on the quest to help people of this small farming community around harvest, Glenn asks Colin, "Hey, there should be tons of hay. Can we get a cart of hay from the people who are giving us gold pieces to go on this quest?" Without missing a beat, Colin replies, "No." Everyone looks around at one another, and Glenn's a bit annoyed but curious. "Okay, but you told us it's a farming community. They can clearly afford to pay us, and it's harvest, so there should be plenty of hay. Can't we just pay for a cart and gather up some hay?" "No." "Is there hay or a cart?" "Yes." "So what's the problem?" Colin at this point just continued to stonewall until he finally admits that he doesn't know what use the cart and hay will go to, and he's afraid that if he allows it, he'll lose control of the group, because he knows he won't be able to anticipate how. but it's gonna get set on fire and wreck his plot. So I look at Glenn. The look on his face is a weird mixture of amusement and yet strange appreciation that his ability to outthink the GM has inspired such an overreaction. My involvement in that campaign didn't last long, mainly because my responsibilities changed and prevented my joining the group. But I'm not sure how much I would have fought to remain in after that event. Not quite, but I did come close and I didn't return for the next session. I can't remember all the details, but there was a dispute within the party about what we would do next. It was something along the lines of one player wanted to follow the bad guy, while most of the rest of us wanted to check out a clue in town. Now, I felt that we had pretty strong in-character reasons for this. When we couldn't reach an agreement, and the first player said his character was going to follow the bad guy regardless, I said that my character would just remain in town. The DM said, "No, I won't have the party separate. You all follow the bad guy." Huh? For me, that was over the line. If the DM wasn't willing to run two separate story threads, I wouldn't have minded him saying, "You stay in town, but you don't find anything more." Meanwhile, for those following the bad guy, I could have waited. And I would have been happy if he'd come up with some in-game reason that my character was forced to follow the other player character out of town. I don't mind a little railroading in the interests of a good narrative. But I felt that there was no point in me being there at all if the DM was just going to directly control my character's decisions without an in-game reason. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell. All of the above will do us a humongo favoro. That being said, let us know in the comments below, has a DM ever made a ruling that instantly made you walk away from the table or rage quit in general? We love you all, please be safe out there, and pick your tables wisely. No game is better than a rigged piece of crap that makes you feel bad. See you next time, bye for now.